graduated in 94, started with a master's in chemical engineering at University of Cincinnati with a focus on environmental engineering. After that, I did a year and a half of environmental engineering in San Diego at a company called RJ Environmental. I was building scrubbers. Um, After that, I did about 3.5 years at Fluor Daniel as a process engineer, working in building refineries. It was a process design for refinery construction. Had a bunch of projects all over the world. Um, Somewhere along the way, changed my path towards project engineering. So that's where was my first change from process to project. As I was doing that for about a year and a half, I got the bug of doing an MBA. So I went to UCLA Business School. Um, During my internship at the business school, I ended up with a internship at Deutsche Bank doing energy and project finance banking. And then that's when I ended up joining Deutsche Bank in my first year, I was expecting to join the energy group, but it was a rotation program that allowed me to intern through a different sets of career groups inside the bank, and one thing led to another, and I ended up joining the leverage loan desk, which is basically providing debt for sub-investment grade issuers, and 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 I've been there basically almost 17 years since. So after 2003, uh, since then I've been at DB for about 17 years, and I run the leverage loan and leverage debt capital markets desk at DB. I can go into a little bit more detail, but that's kind of a high level introduction.
Thank you so much, sir.
Right. Why don't I go after you? Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thanks to Chia for organizing this panel discussion. It's really good to see a lot of colleagues and batchmates. So I'm Pankaj Doshi, and currently I work for Pfizer. I'm sure you've heard of Pfizer, at least in the context of what's going on right now. So I work in the Pfizer Global R&D. Post my graduation, at the time, I wasn't really inspired to do chemical engineering, but really, as many people were and are, a little bit indifferent what you want to do. So I ended up working for Reliance Petroleum for about a year. And a couple of good things came out of it. I knew what I don't want to do. And I kind of got a sense that I really like doing science and technology, and I want to get back to that space. I certainly didn't want to be a manager. I think I was pretty clear right out there. So that was a good experience, about a 1 year working at Reliance. So I came back to IIT, got my MTech, and then went to Purdue for a PhD. Post PhD, I was really set out to get into an academic career. So I spent 2 years in MIT. And I think that's when things went in a different direction. So I was planning to, and I had an inclination to come at least closer to home, which was in somewhere in India, or at least in the vicinities of East Singapore. So I was planning to get into NUS as a professor. And as luck would have been, I was about to send my application, and I think I had a pretty good shot because I had met people from NUS at one of the ASHG meetings. And there was an opening at GlaxoSmithKline, one of the biggest pharma company, and they were building their scientific computing group in their R&D. And they were looking to hire somebody to work on their inhaled portfolio. So Glaxo is a very big inhaled portfolio, which is all the drugs for all your COPD, asthma drugs, and they're really the biggest, and they wanted to build something, and they just hired me. And at that time, just seemed like, something out of the blue, and I thought I'll go there. And I started my career in pharma industry, spent a few years. Then after a few years, again, there was like a fork in the road. I had to move, and I had an offer to go to ExxonMobil in Washington, DC, or come to Pfizer. And for whatever strange reason, I figured that I don't want to be in petrochemical company. I think, it's an old conventional company. Let's move to something more exciting in pharma, and which was, I think, was a good call. So I came to Pfizer, spent a few years, and then I came back to India for personal reasons. So I joined National Chemical Laboratory, and I was Guru's colleague as well as pretty much next door neighbor for a few years. But I think having used to working on bigger problems and pharmaceutical R&D, I thought being in academic setting wasn't as satisfying as it probably would have been if I wasn't in pharma before. So I went back to Pfizer, but with a strange setting that I would partly live in India, partly in US, not to move, but kind of work with Pfizer Global R&D. And since last six years, I've been with them. And it's been an exciting journey. I work on new medicines, developing drugs and whatnot. And I think last year probably was an eye opener for all of us, that how, medicine research can really make an impact, really, this once in a lifetime event. So we'll talk more about it, but just to start off, this is my brief introduction.
Thank you so much.
Hi, JD this side. So thanks Pankaj, thanks Sandeep, very interesting. And a little bit about myself. So, I'll mention the facts first without perhaps getting into the whys behind it. So I'll mention what I did first, and maybe during the Q&A or as we go along, I'll seize the right opportunity to say why I did what I did. Some of it could have been an accident. Some of it could have been well thought through. Whatever it is, we can discuss. So after graduating from IIT Bombay, I went to IIM Lucknow and did my MBA in operations. Like I said, the why has to wait. And then I did a role with Asian Paints for a few years in their supply chain team. So that was very interesting. But then the startup bug bit me around 2000. And I'll also mention a few names from time to time, names that you can connect. So Professor Jayesh Bilare, you should be familiar with.
Yeah.
So he is, one of those people who has had maybe I should say a profound impact in the way I think or the way I see things. And one of the reasons why I took up the startup in Bangalore, completely changed from supply chain to data content aggregation. The startup didn't continue for too long, so I was back to jobs. But somehow I found myself from a logistics role in financial services. Now, don't ask me why, because my MBA was not in finance. I had stayed as far away from finance as I could. But one day I found myself in JP Morgan Chase. And that was interesting, working in a bank. But I realized that this is not my career calling. And I was always keen to be on my own. So my last job stint was with JP Morgan Chase, but then I quit and started my own business sometime in 2007. From investment banking back to supply chain, and from a company that may have had few 100,000 employees, I was back to I, me, myself, peon to president kind of a setup. So it's been interesting to move from large companies to small setups, from startups to being on my own, from supply chain to financial services. But it's been 14 years now. I've been on my own, and it's been an interesting journey. Startup journeys is a topic by itself. I don't think we can really go into too many details here, but I've had a good time. So now my business is completely focused on supply chain, logistics, technology, software, automation, but anything and everything to do with supply chain. So that's where I am, based out of Pune. Thanks.
It's me next, I think. Okay. Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Tushar Gore, and thanks for this invite and the opportunity to participate here. So again, briefly, graduate of 94 batch, as most of the panelists here today. After my BTech, I went to University of Minnesota and finished my PhD there. And the topic was in biomedical engineering and targeted delivery of drugs using proteins and peptides. But subsequently ended up doing something completely different because I felt at the time, research or a career in research was not the right one for me. And so I ended up joining McKinsey in New York, New Jersey, the consulting firm, and worked there for about 2.5 years. And that actually, and probably we'll discuss this more in detail later, but that turned out to be not the right fit for me. So after that, I spent some time in pharmaceuticals, and because of the sort of choice to shift career from research into strategy and consulting, I was working in a pharmaceutical company, Novo Nordisk. So it's a global leader in insulin. Probably people in India have heard of it. Many people use their insulins here. And I was in their strategy and marketing, functions. And worked there for about 4 or 5 years. And again, didn't really feel that strategy and marketing were the right functions and areas for me. And I lucked out in the sense that, our family and particularly my wife's family, that we have a business for making pharmaceuticals. So the bulk drugs, as we call it, the actual chemical ingredients, the active substances. So after Novo Nordisk, I worked for 1 more year in the US at a chemical company, but then became a part of this, it's a small private company run out of Bangalore. The factory is in Bangalore. So for the last 12 years, I've been a part of that. Initial years I spent in the US and trying to set up an office and grow the business there, but eventually moved back to India, and I was running it for a while. Now I'm like an active director, and we have a management team running the business, but I'm quite active in the operations as well. So it's a small pharmaceutical company. If folks have watched any medical related shows, drugs like atropine and buprenorphine, if you have heard of them, we do make them. And it's a small niche business, but back into a little bit of chemicals because of this business. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
You want me to go, Athare?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm Kalyan Hindi. Nickname, I used to be called Handy when at IIT. So I am a little bit of the odd one in this because I'm actually a graduate of 1995 batch, but I do know Guru. I've been in touch with him. We recently talked at the end of December in our 95, Zoom call for the alumni, whatever meet. So it's a good chance to catch up with him. So let me tell a little bit about my journey. So 95, like most, chemies, half the batch would come to US, for master's or PhD. I was one of them. I pretty much followed the herd, basically. I had no clue where actually Ann Arbor was. Only when I landed up here, realized it's so freaking cold. So I came here, and then again, I went through lots of, questions, was pretty much, I came here, but I was very upset that, the social here are very different. And the first 6 months was kind of really, really bad. You miss the kind of people that you see in India. And then going through the questions in my mind, I got into a PhD program. And then I didn't think I was a researcher. So I really asked around. I wanted to get out after a master's. The department would have been upset terribly, but that was not my point. But along the way, I saw a project that was offered, which was a very interdisciplinary project between chemical engineering, EE, and human genetics. So human genetics professor posed the problem that, hey, we need solutions to speed up the human genome project. That was in, really at the midst of in the mid-90s. And then EE and the chemical engineers wanted to build technologies to help with that. When I saw the presentation by, that team, the group, I said, I just fell in love with that technology. It was using semiconductor technology to build my mini devices to speed up the human sequencing. So I had to give a choice for PhD, topics. And I said, if I get this, I'm going to stay, otherwise I'm going to quit. So they had no choice but to keep me. And then once I kind of liked it, it was, kind of getting into the depths of it, understanding all the different techniques, and then applying it to the, to the problem. And I learned tremendously. I also, first time in my life, I really was interested in the basics of chemical engineering, heat transfer, mass transfer, diffusion. I was like, amazed. And then, talking to other people with other folks, I was just using, mass balance equations and this and that. And I was wowing all the EE and the human genetics. So very soon I started creating, I was also started being very creative. And then long story short, in 98, we had a breakthrough in science. We had top 10 innovations, for being able to first make a semiconductor chip that can sequence, human DNA. Actually, some of those technologies are the birth of the next gen sequencing technologies right now that you see. So had a good run in my PhD, and then so my question at the end of my, towards my graduation was, hey, this is cool science, but I don't want to be a footnote in the end of a science paper. I wanted to make sure that technology was available as a product. Otherwise, it's totally useless. So with that in mind, I really wanted to go get experience in a startup and then start my own company, because I had seen along the way that some of the most exciting technologies, exciting work was coming from startups. That's what I saw in conferences. So as I was going through that process, one of the local VC found a science article, tracked through, and then got connected to me. And that's pretty much, I had to decide, hey, somebody was interested, we had money, and I had no clue of the business. So I had to decide whether to, meet him to kind of, talk about this. And it was a, pretty easy decision for me, because at that point I was a graduate student. I had no family. For me, felt like, oh, I'm gonna learn tremendously. I just jumped in, and that was, a deciding factor in the next journey of my life. So I finished up my PhD, got a little bit of seed money from the local investor, and started building together the team. And then started, basically that's what HandyLab started. Again, the the name was not picked by me; it was by the investor. Yeah, because he had wanted to call it Handy. He was calling it Handy's Lab on a Chip project. So, and then we picked up the name HandyLab. At that point, we were building a handheld, almost like a palm. You put a cartridge and you could analyze DNA from different chemical samples. So that was the vision. And then it took us a lot of time to really build the technology, to build the product. So tremendous learning, on the technology development. And along the way, we had to raise a lot of money from venture capital, because it was very capital intensive in a project. But it took us about 7-8 years to get a really kick-ass product in the hospital market. And then basically people could run samples in that machine 24 at a time, give you a result for using a technical PCR. And then we were targeting different bacteria, flu, viruses, and things like that. So the hospitals really started buying those machines. And then we quickly accelerated, and all the other strategic companies in that space wanted to work with us. Long story short, BD acquired the company in 2009, and then I stayed on with the company, BD, and then did the next platform development. And once it got into FDA trials, I actually I got very bored. I felt like I'm not I cannot manage pace up with the pace of a large company. I really like the fast-paced environment of a startup. So I actually came back to another startup to the ground floor. So my wife, she's a molecular biologist. She was also going through her own journey. So she had a team of other two friends, molecular biologists, who started working on a concept business plan. And I was mentoring them in 2010 timeframe. And then once they started getting traction, they won some local business plan competitions. Then I felt like, oh, I should give it enough shot to get them, to the next level. And it was a difficult decision because, we had two kids at the time. My wife, was putting her own money, and then both husband and wife working on the same startup. It's a, huge commitment for the whole family. So we had to get my wife's parents to help us, as we went through that process. And I said, okay, let's give it 6 months, see where it goes. I think because some of those things we were able to, because of the pressure, we also were able to, being very creative. And within 2 months, we won the world's largest business plan competition. So that I brought in $500,000. And then I took that and leveraged the angel group around to put more money. So that was in 2011. And then long story short, we went through ups and downs, and then we moved the company eventually from initially we were in cancer diagnostics, then we moved it to and cutting edge research technique called single cell genomics. We're trying to analyze single cell by cell level, a very hot area in the research market. So we got actually acquired by Bio-Rad on April 1st, the day the stock market tanked in US. So it was kind of we were still very early on in our maturity. We would have died if we were not would have been acquired basically. So I've been with Bio-Rad for the last 8-9 months. So as Bio-Rad got acquired, the coronavirus pandemic hit, and my first company's product, HandyLab, the first automated instrument to automate COVID testing in the world. BD actually launched it, and it gave me tremendous happiness that what we had worked on is being used in such a high level across the world. So I felt very good that I had a chance to be involved in something that was impactful. And then as I was thinking through my next move, what to do after the acquisition of Celsee, which was the second startup, I felt there is an opportunity here to leverage the big company resource, which is the Bio-Rad, and then do something even more impactful. That's why I started seeding some ideas within the top leadership, and then basically I just got into the role of VP of innovation for their clinical diagnostic division, and they want me to kind of seed a couple of high impactful platforms in the molecular space, and I'm actually helping with that. So hoping with the right environment within a large company and the resource behind it, I can kind of do something that really will help maybe 10 years down the road. But that's my current situation. Thank you.
Cool, great, thanks. So I think that's only me left. Hi everyone, my name is Amit Pathare, and I entered IIT in 1990, but I left in 1995. So I was part of the 5-year MTech in chemical engineering cohort, which was a very small cohort there. So after my MTech in IIT, to the chagrin of my advisor, Professor Zoekar, I did not stay in chemical engineering, and I went for an MBA program in the US. After 1 year, I promptly dropped out of the program because I wanted to work in management consulting, and also felt that doing an MBA so quickly after a master's without any work experience wouldn't make sense. So I ended up navigating from the US to France, where I did some research while looking for a job in management consulting. So got into strategy consulting in Booz and Company in Hong Kong. And while I was over there, I just got an interest in the energy sector, because I felt that energy was the motive force behind all progress. So I was really fascinated by the energy sector. And since then, I've driven my career mainly in the energy sector. So I felt that I needed a combination of skills in energy and in finance. So I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers in London in financial services and financial risk management. Did a second master's in energy policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, and then started working in the energy sector after that. So interned in a company in the US, then joined a company that you may have heard of called Enron in the structured finance team in London. Within 3 months of my joining, this was 2001, Enron collapsed, went into Chapter 11, and then I was out on the street once again looking for a job. So managed to find another job in Aon in London. Aon is an insurance brokerage, and we worked there in risk management, and then gradually rebuilt my career over the next few years in the energy sector. So that took me from London to Denver and Houston in the US, and then back to Europe in Brussels this time, where I joined a company which was at the time called Suez. So Suez was the company that built the Suez Canal, and it was a big player in energy, water, and waste. And Suez then merged with another company called GDF to make GDF Suez. That turned into Engie. So gradually, I spent about 10 years with them. And through those 10 years, I pretty much tracked the evolution of the whole sector, starting from something that was based a lot on fossil fuels, and then evolving gradually to renewables, to electric mobility, to energy efficiency solutions. and increasingly where we build kinds of business models to integrate the whole thing together. So what we would do is we would go to large complex clients like cities, but also like universities, airports, ports, and say, look, we will deploy all of the solutions, we will finance all the solutions, and what we will do is we will guarantee you a reduction in your carbon footprint, we will guarantee you a reduction in the costs, and we will take care of all the energy needs for you. So these are the kinds of solutions that we built. Along the way, my role, apart from the commercial role, my role also involved the translation of new innovative technologies. I had to work with my researchers. I had to take their work, their technological proofs of concept, and convert them into commercial proofs of concept, meaning I had to wrap a business model around them. And then I had to create a roadmap for scaling up these new technologies or these new businesses. So my job and my team's jobs in my employer were to take all of these businesses and grow them globally. So that was especially interesting because we worked on all of the new technologies and across all different countries. So when I was working, I was based first in Belgium, then in the Middle East, in Dubai, and then finally I was based at the headquarters in Paris, where I was part of the top management of the group. And then for the last 3 years, so after doing all of this work in the corporate realm, I just thought that I was in my mid-40s by the time, and I felt that if I don't create a startup now, I will never do it in my life. So the startup got hit, and I then moved from Paris to Singapore to set up my own company. And I've been working on that for the last 3 years. And essentially, it's been a continuation of the work that I did in clean energy, which was the translation of new clean energy technologies and the deployment of these new businesses and these new commercial business models across clients in the Asia Pacific region, but also beyond that to other different parts of the world. So and then as part of starting the company, I obviously needed to manage my cash flow as well, because at the time I have my family, so of course I have to keep the home fires burning. So along with that, I also moonlighted with a university here in Singapore called NTU. That's the Nanyang Technological University, where I worked in the Energy Research Institute, and I managed some of their flagship programs in the clean energy domain. So that gave me a good inroad into all of these Singaporean agencies, while keeping me abreast of all of the new technological developments that were happening in Singapore. And that also exposed me to new technologies, where I took some technologies from the university and I created further startups out of them. So one of the startups I created was called Print Solar Technologies, where we took a new solar material called perovskites, and we worked on different ways of manufacturing those perovskites. So from screen printing to slot die coating to vapor deposition. So it's various different engineering technologies there. So over the years, I found myself coming back from management into more and more engineering-led fields. And actually, I felt very grateful for my engineering degree, because it allowed me to straddle those divides very well between the technologists, the innovators on the one hand, and the hard-nosed commercial people on the other. And this is where I am right now in Singapore, still trying to keep the startups going. It's been rather challenging over the last 3 years, lots of ups and downs, but I think I'm very, very happy with having made this move, because if I hadn't made it, I wouldn't have enjoyed myself so much over the last 2 years with all the ups and downs. So yes, that's about me. Happy to take any questions as we go along. I will leave like Jaideep, I'll leave the whys to the to the Q&A session, and I hope I was clear enough in the what. Thanks.
Yes.
Over to you, Kathy.
Yeah, definitely. So, sir, actually, after listening to all of you, since some of you have been in the startup side, I was reminded of a poem we generally study in high school, "The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost, and it's about something when a person has some choices and he tries to take the unconventional one, the one that's not generally taken by everybody around. And I think startup business was something of a road not taken during your time. So you definitely had to weigh the pros and cons and the various opportunities that lay ahead, but also the risks that could have been a great setback. So, in your opinion, what could be the various unconventional opportunities for the present undergraduate and postgraduate students, especially when we are going through the pandemic and most of the opportunities seem shut off? So, what could be that something unconventional for them? How could they
Maybe,
give a start to it?
Khyati, before you get into, what are the opportunities, and I'm sure there are plenty of them. Also, an important or perhaps a more important question is why? Why would you want to do a startup,
Right,
right?
right,
So that is also, at one level, it's philosophical. There's no one right answer. And it has the answer to that why has to be aligned to your aspirations, your skill sets, your expectations, in life, expectations from life, etc., etc. So I'll be keen to hear what are the opportunities for chemical engineers. That's not my area, but just wanted to leave everyone with this thought that please do introspect, right? Just because an opportunity is very promising technically or commercially,
right.
need not be the only reason why everyone should jump into it, right? It may be good for some, it may not be good for others. That's all.
That's point taken. Jaideep, if I may add to that, yes, indeed. And actually, in this generation, you see a lot more startups coming up. You see VCs, angel investors, far, far more active than they were about 25 years back in our time. But that doesn't mean, of course, that just because you see everyone and their uncle doing a startup, you should also equally be pressurized to do a startup. In, in some cases, of course, like Jaideep, they hit on startups pretty early in their careers. In my case, I had to wait until my mid 40s to understand first what I wanted to do, to satisfy myself that I had acquired all of the skills in order to be able to branch out on my own. And I was very happy with the work that I did in the corporate realm as well. And only when I went through that whole journey of multiple functional roles in the corporate sector, then I felt confident enough to say, okay, I think I have a good knowledge of the industry. I think I have a good knowledge of the niche and the specific technologies or business models that I wanted to work on. And that gave me the confidence to step out and to actually launch on my own. Uh, so that's one thing. And then I will answer your second question on the different technologies. Of course, there's a whole plethora of technologies. I'll just answer those that I feel are really cool from my perspective. So there's of course several technologies in the renewable sector as well, and including even in the solar domain, there are multiple new materials that are being worked on. There's multiple new innovations in manufacturing itself, and there's multiple innovations in the business models. So there's three levels of innovation. There's materials, there's manufacturing or engineering, and then there's the commercial innovation that goes to translating these technologies into the commercial realm and then scaling them up. So the scale up is also a huge challenge. So that's one thing. And then of course, there's so many other other plays these days in the energy efficiency realm, in the electric mobility realm, in green hydrogen. So there's multiple areas which are of relevance, not just to chemical engineering, but of course to a multidisciplinary set of engineering disciplines, which should open up avenues for all of you. So yeah, I'll just stop there and pass on to someone else who may want to pick it up.
Yeah. So, and sir, one another thing which was a general curiosity was how important is having a stable financial backing for a startup? Like, could you start not having a lot of financial resources?
What do I mean by that? It is 5-star important. It is 7-star important. It is 10-star important if there is some such word. So please do not underestimate the value of a fixed salary. Look, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? When you're in a corporate job, you say, my job sucks, and there are these bright kids out there and they seem to be having a ball of a time, etc., etc. You give them a few drinks and then they will tell you the truth. Yeah. So financial stability, financial security is super critical. It doesn't matter where it comes from. You can hit a lottery, you can inherit, you can earn. It doesn't matter, but it has to be with you.
Right.
Andy, maybe you want to say something, and then I'll add something.
Yeah. So again, I think on the startup world, there are people go into it because it gives them happiness, not because they want to make money. And that's how I should see it. I mean, do it for the right reasons. If you think that, hey, I'll do a startup and I will make lots of money, the road to that, going through that is very difficult. There are a lot of things have to fall right. And then typically, if you stay at it long, you will go through lots of near-death experiences that builds your character and builds your resilience for doing it better and better. So do you have the financial stability to go through that entire process? I mean, that's a question you have asked. But I think people do get into startups because they love that area and they really want to make an impact. So that's how I feel.
I would agree with that. In my view, okay, so yes, of course, when you go into a startup, you at least have to have some kind of a financial security behind you. But of course, it can't be all encompassing. In some sense, you have to take a leap of faith as well. So when your investors look at you, when your other counterparts look at you, they have to get a sense of what you have to lose, because that creates the internal drive in you as well. Uh, so, so that's something that obviously comes with being in a startup. You have to have that hunger inside you to say that, okay, I will go above and beyond what I would normally have done in a regular job, because my life depends on it, my family depends on it. But yes, you have to go with at least some level of security. So in my case, I said, okay, I went with at least 2 years of liquidity behind me to say, okay, my family can run on this money for 2 years, and then it's my job to make sure that the cash flow keeps coming. So every year my job was to stretch that liquidity so that my margin of comfort would at least be 2 years, and hopefully more than 2 years. Now with COVID, I must say that it has dropped, but nevertheless, the fact that I had that 2 year cushion helped me a lot, because at least there is something going on for me, and I can still keep going, keep my business going, even if there was a slowdown last year. But that's something that is absolutely critical for all of you. Maybe in your 20s, when you don't have a family, things are slightly different. But when you have a family, when you have fees to pay for your kids, when you have mortgages to take care of, yes, it does make a difference, and it better be completely stable, so that you can then spend a lot of time and effort on the business which you will need to do, without having to worry at the back of your hand about the back of your head about where your next meal is coming.
Right. Right. Uh, and many of you have gone through a higher study of chemical engineering. So was it a trend at that time, or was it something you were genuinely interested in? Like how did you start?
In my batch, I think we had half of the class came to US for masters and or PhD, and then other half either took up a job or some of them went to MBA. I think in my case, I followed the herd. I had a good offer. I actually had an offer from Schlumberger at the time. It was going to be good paying, but I felt that getting education and probably would make it better in the long run. But I pretty much followed the herd at the time. I mean, everybody was going where I will also go.
Yeah, I would echo with that too. I mean, it was like, I think half of our class probably came to the US. But it was at least, in my mind, it was the 4 years that you got, you at least give it one more shot, see where it leads to. That's what I ended up doing too. I gave it another 4 or 5 years in terms of working in chemical engineering too. So that's
Yeah.
that's the part.
I think I'll just echo something about chemical engineering. I have had a chance to understand different industries and where chemical engineers have made an impact. Chemical engineers are taught very fundamental techniques, like the processes, and they are also taught how to scale up things. That knowledge is applicable in every industry, whether pharmaceutical, whether in my area, in, diagnostics or life science. If you go back, 30, 40 years back, all the semiconductor industry boom is all because of chemical engineers. You won't believe it. And then, because we are meant to think about processor inputs, outputs, how to optimize it, that actually also works in, if you see, in the financial industry. I'm not surprised that a lot of, chemical engineers go into that area too. I think the basic education is tremendously helpful without getting tied down to a particular, domain, like whether, pharmaceuticals or, chemicals or fertilizer. I think those process knowledge, the mass balance, heat balance, that applies everywhere. Even if you think about it, if they get in chemical engineers to figure out the logistical distribution of vaccines right now across the world, I think they'll do a better job than anybody else.
So please don't throw away your vote, Stuart Lightfoot or McCabe Smith.
Yeah, we still have ours. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, like whenever you went, when you went for higher studies, and it was, since if it was something which you did along with the herd, so that in the back of your mind something must be going on, that what if I do not like it? What if after the 5 years of the PhD I am not able to sustain whatever I aspire to do with the chemical engineering degree? Like, how do you take that the leap of faith at that point of time? Especially like Tushar sir and Sandeep sir,
Yeah.
like completely changed your profile after that. So
Right. So I'll talk a bit about that. So first is the choice to do a PhD. Again, it was largely due to, that's what most people did, and I had the opportunity to go to the one of the best schools in the US for chemical engineering. So it was kind of hard to say no. And one other thing was, 25 years ago the world was a lot different. Now there is so much choice in terms of what one can do after undergraduate. In our times, it was a lot less so. And I actually feel, in after a certain point, choice is almost like the enemy of contentment. You have too many choices, and then you're trying to optimize so much that you lose track of, at what point you should stop and sort of enjoy, what you're doing and what you're getting for it. But we'll come back to that later. So yeah, that was the main reason I went for my PhD. And as I said earlier, I realized, and this is where things are a bit tricky, and it's a lot of sort of individual and getting to know yourself. And I think this is a theme. I think Jaideep also started talking about it. That self-awareness of what one likes and what one is good at is important. And I felt at that time that research and a career in research was not the right thing for me. And coincidentally, things were opening up for non-MBAs, as we were called that time, for consulting or in consulting and investment banking areas. So I thought, I should give that a try. And of course, you go to the website of McKinsey and all these companies, and I had a couple of seniors who were working at McKinsey at that time, and you hear the stories, and you're like, that's the place you want to work at. So that was the reason to change, my career at that time. But as I said, consequently or subsequently, I realized that, I didn't find that work very rewarding. So I spent 2 years at McKinsey, and it wasn't a good time for me. And basically, I had to leave from McKinsey after 2.5 years. So in my case, it was I would say it was a lack of self-awareness on what I really liked. And even though I had the benefit of a couple of seniors working at McKinsey, if I had maybe talked to them a little bit more on what the job involves, and what how do they get their satisfaction from working in a consulting field, maybe things might have been different. But hindsight is 2020. But on a related point, I mean, the thing is, the challenge is, if we are dealing with options, it's always good to, I feel, have the get your technical degree and be in the technical field to decide whether you really want to be in it. Because once you switch out of it, it's very hard to come back. we can switch out of a technical field by going for an MBA, or I mean, these days I think consulting companies might be, can hire without an MBA as well. But in my case, like once I went into McKinsey and my other jobs, it would have been extremely hard to come back and get into a technical area. As I said, I was lucky that there was this small family business that I could be a part of and come back to it. But as people are thinking about keeping options open, once you switch out of a technical field, it's hard to come back in, at least doing like real science and development. Maybe as a manager of technology and things like that, that can happen. But to be really active and actively, contribute to the scientific thinking, that's going to be difficult. So that's something to think.
Right.
Yes, on my end, I think basically echoing what Tushar just went through, I think for me, it was a little bit more that whenever there is an opening and a fork opens up, it just being able to choose the right one. And as you go down that path, seeing if that was the right way or not. And what ended up happening for me, so just to give you a little bit of background, I went to business school. I was really not even thinking about doing investment banking. I was all gung-ho about management consulting. And as you went through a lot of the recruitment process, the investment banking came up as an option, and I was lucky enough to get an internship at Deutsche Bank. I went, did a summer there, worked out great. And as I was about to join, I was thinking that I was going to be in the energy banking group. And as things opened up through, you got different options in at least in banking. I think the key is to be able to fit with the right set of people, because it's a pretty intense job. And I think at least 20 years ago, I think things have changed in our industry also dramatically. But 20 years ago, it was a more like a 15 to 18 hour job pretty much every day. And you didn't get to see your family at all for almost 7-8 years. So I think the key for me was to actually end up in the right group. And even in a big organization like DB, you can be a lot more entrepreneurial. So what I do for a day-to-day basis is actually not be like in a group of 100,000 people. Our group is like 15 people, and you are creating opportunities that way. So I think it's being able to make the right choices as opportunities open up. And sometimes you're lucky, and sometimes that luck is kind of an important factor, at least in my mind, that you end up making the right choices along the way.
Right.
Kathy, do you want to take the questions on the chat, or do you want to first complete your?
Sir, I'll actually the questions that I have in mind, they are somewhat resonating to them, so I'll take them up along the way.
Sure.
Yeah. So presently, like after the 4 years of the BTech degree, people generally have an option of going for higher studies or going for a job. So do you think that if like going for higher studies basically prepares them for a job, or is like what is the scenario of job versus higher studies? How does one decide what they want to take up? Because it's generally a very confusing thing.
Yeah, there can't be one answer. It really depends on what is the specific job opportunity vis-a-vis what is the specific higher studies opportunity, right? And then one may be more interesting than the other. So I'll share with you what happened with me, right? And I think I mentioned Professor Jayesh Bellare once, and I'll mention it again. So in the final year, I wasn't exactly sure what I want to do. I had not applied for chemical engineering jobs, but as luck would have it, I had an offer from a company which was relatively unknown at that time. So it was a risk joining Infosys. But I wasn't sure, right? I mean, their IPO had failed. And it wasn't necessarily a company that when I told my parents and my uncles and relatives I have a job from Infosys, they said, "Wo kya hota hai?" Right? Can't you get anything better? So anyway, but I remember talking to Professor Jayesh Bellare, and he said that, look, if you have an offer from an IIM, then you should always get the best education that you can possibly have, right? Those are opportunities that are hard to come by. And jobs are always there. This job or that job, you'll always get it later. So in my case, it wasn't necessarily a job that one would give an arm and a leg for. Let's face it. I mean, with full respect for Infosys, not that. I mean, it's a great organization, and I have real respect for it. But for a chemical engineer to do the job of a coder after BTech didn't sound really exciting. So therefore, I weighed in favor of higher education. Now, if somebody else has a job which is super interesting, which is giving the right opportunities, tremendous learning value, exactly what they want to do, etc., 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 then I see no harm done. In fact, it's great if you can do a job after BTech and then make up your mind what kind of higher studies you want to do later.
Yeah, I would agree. Given a choice between, making money from a job, go for more education, or where you can either get more new learning or new responsibilities, because it's important to keep learning. I mean, as an undergrad, you're just coming out, everything is new. I think just more you can get more responsibilities or more challenges, the better it'll pan out later on, I think.
Yes, maybe I can offer a slightly complementary perspective that yes, if you of course your life can evolve in various different ways, and of course your likings, your interests may also evolve over that time. But let's say at the end of your BTech program, if you at that time feel like I need to study this, like I need to study a particular subject, ongoing in chemical engineering or in any other form of engineering or in management, if you feel very strongly about it, please go for it, because education will never hurt you. If you're not sure what you want to study, and then I would say that hey, if you have a job, be it whatever job it is, I would say I would be more inclined to actually go for the job, to get an experience of what it's like in a professional environment, to go through the grind of something. I mean, if the job is good, then that's fine. You get great experience. If the job is not good, you nevertheless still have to be professional. You have to do all the tedious things. You have to go through the discipline of what it takes to earn money, what it takes to build relationships, what it takes to influence people. Those are the skills that you will definitely learn out of a job. And over that time, maybe you get a better sense of what you want to study further. So that's what my experience was, that I just went into an MBA program because I was getting a full fellowship in the US. And because at the time I felt, oh, great, I have a chance to go out of India. So let me just get out of India and see what happens. At the end of that 1 year, I realized that hey, I wasn't fully utilizing that MBA program very well because I didn't come with any work perspective. And so I thought, I need to go out, get a job, get some real world experience. And then maybe I need to think about whether an MBA is what I want to go for. And as it turns out, I did not go back to that MBA program. I actually went for a master's in public policy program because energy policy and regulations are so critical for the development of the energy sector. And I knew what I wanted to get, why I wanted to study it, and where I wanted to do it. So after 2 years of working, then I went back with a far more informed mindset back into university. And those 2 years were the best of my life. I got a lot more out of it than I would have gotten out of that MBA program that I went into earlier.
I'd like to echo what Amit just said. I think there's one advantage of going for job, and I'm not saying if you like. So I think the problem is after BTech, as a lot of us did, went with the herd. I didn't do that for many number of reasons. So I ended up working for a year. And I think there were two things very clear, what I didn't want to do. And I realized, then I think I want to be in science. I want to do research. Now the challenge is what kind of research. So that was pretty clear. And I think that was a good learning for 1 year of working, because I figured that I will never do marketing, sales, pretty much any kind of managing. I just couldn't bear that. I mean, the kind of job they do, I felt it was very uninteresting. And so coming back to IIT, and then I think the challenge was, I think the real problem with chemical engineering, the way it has evolved, either you can be very practical, hands-on, but the kind of education we get at IIT sometimes, it's very much on the science sides of things. So you need to find a passion. You need to find some people who inspire. I used to read about Professor Bird. I mean, I think he is a giant, and not that he is, he's written an amazing book, but he solved, he brought in good science, but solved real problems. I mean, if you get a chance to read about him, how he would go on this long, long session with student in the woods in Wisconsin and think about application of transport phenomena for solving real problem. He invented a whole field of polymer science. So I think, I would say that, look, all these things are great. The startups and all in US works well because there's a huge background of basic science, engineering, everything. They set it up. So it's very easy to do that in that environment, but it's very hard to come up with startups which actually would address problems like, coming up new drugs or, creating something very new, even coming with new technology, new energy, whatever you might have. So having a passion, but a job for a year or two doesn't hurt. I mean, I think what Pathare said, all these skills are very useful. You will not lose anything. And my sense is feeling this amazing, intense pressure that you can get something right. Life is long. You're just 21, 22 or 23 in some cases. It doesn't hurt. You can feel less pressure and get something going. You learn. And I think what Jaideep was saying that, you can still study. I mean, you can have a great job and you will realize, okay, I might want to study a little bit more and probably do better. So, a lot of times, like, Sandeep was saying, getting an MBA after 5 years of engineering probably was more enriching, because you get a sense, this is what I want to do. So I feel that, personally, I feel that getting a business degree without being in corporate sector or industry or having done no business may not be as useful. You can get it, but I think if you work for a couple of years, you know where to apply the skill. I mean, that's just my thinking, not that I have any experience in that space. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll take a question from the chat now. It's by Anirudh Mittal. Having worked all around the globe, can you help us understand how difficult it is to get a job outside India right after graduation and not through the campus placement process? Can you discuss this across the domains of tech, semi-tech, and non-tech? Tech,
Yeah.
including engineering, semi-tech,
Okay.
including project management and product management,
Okay.
and non-tech is management consulting.
Right. I'll be happy to start off over here, and I would say that please do not rely just on campus placement. I mean, campus placement is good, of course. Use every opportunity that you get, but in my case, I just went far beyond campus placement. Ultimately, your employer needs to see how badly you want the job and how much effort you've taken to understand and to network, to connect with them. So I would go to all kinds of excesses in trying to connect with different employers. So in fact, I would go to the extent that let's say, when I was in Harvard, I was studying at the Harvard Kennedy School. And obviously, not everyone came to the Harvard Kennedy School to recruit. There were some people who only went to the business school. There were some people who only went to other schools. So I would go to the extent that I would go to each hotel in the vicinity. I would find out which companies had come to that hotel. I would find those specific teams. I would go to the websites. I would find the name of the HR person. I would draft them an email, have 4 copies of my CV ready. And in fact, go to the hotel. So this is pre 9/11 days, when security was a bit more lax, but nevertheless, the principle still holds. Then I would knock on the doors, and let's say if someone called Sylvia opens and say, "Hey, hi Sylvia, how are you? Hey, did you get my CV?" And she would say, "No, who are you?" I said, "Hey, hang on, I sent you my CV. No worries. Here's 4 copies. Here's why I should be interviewing with you for." And then they would say, "No, sorry, you're not in the list." And then the answer is that, look, you've flown in all of these people from all over the place to come here and to interview people. Obviously, some of those students are not going to turn up. So if you don't have, if you have any empty slots there, then please, instead of keeping those slots empty, why not find someone who actually wants to interview with you? So that way, I would just keep pushing. And 8 times out of 10, they would give me a kick on the backside and they would send me packing. But 2 times, they would actually give me an interview. And I actually did get 2 job offers in that way. I got my job in Hong Kong, which I did in exactly that way, where people didn't even have a room to interview me. And we ended up having my interviews on the grass, on the lawns outside. And I got a job that evening, which put me in Hong Kong. another job with at the time it was Credit Suisse. So I went through all of the interviewing process. My first interview, the guy barely even looked at me because he just didn't have any time, and he interviewed me while he was packing. So he didn't even look at me. But since that went well, I got a call back, and it led to some jobs. So ultimately, I would say in your placement, don't just limit yourself to companies that come on campus and go all out to schmooze you. You have to do it the other way around as well. You have to do your research, and like as Tushar mentioned, having some self-awareness helps. Knowing exactly why you want certain companies, why you want certain domains, brings a level of authenticity when you go and make a pitch to people. And this discipline also becomes very, very useful to you later on in your career as well, because you have to keep on doing the same thing, whether you're in a corporate or whether you're in a startup trying to pitch for business. It's the same principle. The jobs or the success isn't gained by the people who are the best. It's always gained by the people who are willing to go the extra mile.
You know, I'll just put it perhaps a little more in layman terms. What Amit mentioned, first हाथ पैर तो मारना पड़ेगा, right? No matter what you do. And what I will be concerned with is a sense of entitlement that sometimes some of us get. That just because we have those 3 magic letters on our CV, right? Certain opportunities must come our way, right? And the world is unfair if we don't get that opportunity. So, you know, the blame is with the world, the blame is with the organization, the blame is with everyone around you except yourself, and you did not even move a finger to get there, right? So who's to blame if those opportunities don't come your way? Yeah. So they are out there. Like Amit said, you have to go out and seek them. Will you succeed? There's no law of nature that says you will succeed. But if you don't try, you will surely not succeed.
Yeah.
So that's the other side.
I think just to be specific to the question which was asked about, you know, possibility of getting a job in different sectors. So you have to look at the ratios. I think, you know, core chemical engineering right after BTech, probably it's a little more difficult to find jobs anywhere in the world simply because the demand to supply ratio is not as skewed compared to, let's say, technology sector. I think you have to look at that also because, you know, I mean, at least I don't remember ever, you know, Pfizer being a large company or any other company I worked at, you know, they would look for undergraduates all over the world. You know, certainly they would like to get people with higher skills, you know, graduate degrees and all that, and they go extra mile. And even if they do hire folks all over the world when they have PhDs. So you could foresee a lot of PhDs from India who have done really well and relevant can get jobs. So I'm talking about core technology sector, you know, and technology defined as chemical engineering here. But that doesn't necessarily apply. So there has to be some sense, right? That obviously you have to try really hard, as you know, both these guys said. But in some cases, you know, just the fact that the ratio is skewed, there's, you know, they're not looking to hire 10,000 chemical engineers. They might be looking to hire 10,000 data scientists or whatever, you know, that might be the case. So I think something of that sort certainly will drive, right? Without that matching, no matter how hard you try, it's just not there. So I can't foresee a lot of openings in chemical engineering. Let's say if the plan to move is to US or Europe without getting a master's or PhD.
Yeah,
I think just on our end, at least on the financial services side, I'm presuming there's a lot more recruitment that happens directly out of campus on IIT Bombay. I think the financial services industry does tend to be a little bit more inward focused. So there is like a very, very systematic cycle of recruitment that happens around internships and stuff like that. So I think, unfortunately, at least on the large cap bulge bracket investment banking side, it's a little bit more challenging to recruit outside of the regular pathway. But you do have a lot of smaller size investment banks that would recruit out of cycle. And I think there, Amit is absolutely right in terms of knocking on doors does open up a lot of opportunities. And I think there is obviously banking is a natural sector that engineers do tend to gravitate to. The clear skill set is there in terms of problem solving and and easily transferable financial modeling skills. So I think that skill set directly comes from engineering into banking. The question is that what is the right time frame to do it? Is it like right out of school? A lot of kids that you see, if you are really not, if engineering is not really for you, chemical engineering is not really for you, maybe banking is the next adjacent sector that is available. And we tend to take basically anyone who has a bright mind and has the financial, not even modeling skills can be taught. I think it's more about, do you like problem solving? And that kind of is the main skill set that we're looking for.
Yeah, on the
I
job
just
front,
wanted to add one thing, just on the, the fact or the reason behind the question. I think the question is around how difficult is it to get a job outside India right after graduation. If the motivation is it a choice between, doing kind of a post degree, like a master's or a PhD, and then look for a job in the country that, one does the degree in, or to skip that degree and go for the job. If that is the motivation, I think, I think Pankaj alluded to this also. I would say to directly get, a job outside India, and I'm thinking of US and Europe, would be harder. Again, one can't say impossible and things like that. There could be a specific opportunity, and if there are enough strong networks that one has access to, things are possible. But if that's the thinking, then the standard way is to get a degree. I mean, go to the country of choice and get a second degree, a master's, and then look for a job while you are there. That's a much more.
I am familiar with the process in the US. Here, to get a job after master is easier because you get 1 or 2 years of practical training on your visa. So there's there's no burden on the employer. But that's a good enough time for a new graduate to get experience in that company and build credibility. And then once you build that, they don't want to lose you after they have trained you. So they'll do whatever to go through your immigration process. I mean, to get a job here, the key thing is not dictated by your skill set and the available industry, but often by the immigration, caps on different, job H-1B classes and whatnot. So that actually drives it, nothing else.
If I may add to that, there's one sense in which things have become maybe a lot easier now compared to about 25 years back, which is that you get the opportunity for a lot of international internships. Like at our time, for instance, we would just look at local internships or maybe just go to different cities within India. But here, in your case, I see so many examples of kids doing multiple international internships after their second year, third year. So if at all you get these kinds of opportunities, once you are there, once you are in Europe or in the US or wherever it is in the world that you get that internship, please use the opportunity to network as much as possible. And then that will just open up certain doors, because ultimately people make hiring decisions based on familiarity, based on how they have seen you perform, based on the attitude that they have seen, which is a lot more valuable than a 1 hour or a 2 hour interview that they may have, or even multiple interviews that they may have. So if you get these kinds of opportunities, please do maximize your networking while you're out there, especially if you're looking for a job outside of India, and then see what comes up. And I'm sure that statistically, you will see these opportunities turn up in some way, shape, or form. If someone wants you, they will move heaven and earth to get you if you're demonstrating that value.
Yeah, and I would take the new environment of Zoom call, offsite working to make opportunities for yourself. Offer yourself to do problems solving for them while you are still a student, because you want to build that network and just leverage that after that.
Yeah. And one point on management consulting, please don't be in a rush to go to management consulting immediately after your engineering, because I think there's a difference in management consultants who come with prior corporate experience and management consultants who have done only management consulting all their lives. There is a big difference there. So please be very careful about that. Okay, I would say get some expertise in the field that you're in or in some other field. And then eventually, I think you will get a much bigger perspective, a much better perspective as a management consultant.
Right, right. I'll club a few questions from the chat because they're kind of similar. From Raj, Pragesh, and Saksham. So the question basically is that while we are still a student, we've not had a taste of what the outer world has for us. While we are still in our 4-year degree program, how do we decide, or how do we explore opportunities? Like it's generally said, explore karo. You have a lot of opportunities, look for them, but how? What exactly should a student look for? How exactly should he utilize these 4 years in deciding what does he have to do at the end of that 4-year line? How exactly, like taking up projects under professors or taking up internships, or what exactly, how to go about the process?
So internships are definitely an option. And I think today it's a far more organized industry than in the past. I mean, in our times, the internship after third year was the only internship we did, and it was more of a ritual that the institute required us to get a certificate from a company. So we did exactly that. We got a certificate from a company, and that was the end of it. But today it's a lot more organized. I can see that the ambition amongst the students to do internships right after the first year is there, which is good. But I would only caution that, don't spread out too thinly, because sometimes I see that there is one internship in a pharma company in a research role, the second internship is in a bank, and then the third internship is with a sports organizing company. And then the student is applying for a job in energy. So, boss, ye ho kya raha hai? Matlab, where is this guy? I mean, there's nothing in common. There's no thread joining these dots. So that's a little risk. If you go overboard with too many internships and then too much of diversity, you need to have a strong storyline to explain why you did what you did. Otherwise, it will come across as, this student doesn't really know what he or she wants. She's all over the place. So be careful.
Just want to add to that. I think, obviously you want to explore a lot, right? But think about it. You're 18, 19 years old. You have, for whatever reason, you have chosen to study chemical engineering. It wouldn't hurt to at least learn about what you've chosen to study. Okay, pay a little bit attention, because the thing is, at least you should make a clear call whether you like it or not. Right? I mean, I feel that I should have spent more time in the lab and understanding, you try to visit a chemical plant, a petrochemical plant, it's the magical place. I mean, I think as an engineer, try to observe something, as a civil engineer, if you go over a phenomenal bridge, you got to feel the marvel of engineering technology. I would recommend, I remember during our visits, we went to NOSEL. Not that we care much about it, but I think looking back, I feel that what these guys accomplished, this is like a sum total, hundreds of years of knowledge. You may choose not to become chemical engineer. You can do whatever you like, but at least pay attention, because then you take a very informed call that, look, I chose to get into it because I didn't know any better, but I don't want to do it because I don't like it. But who's to say you may not like it? Because look, industry is going through a revolution. You like technology, industry is looking at industry 4.0. There is a technology, there is IoT, there is a you name it, it's all there. What might be a core industry. So don't get put off that, oh, I will have to do something very core. In a core word essentially might reek of something old. That is not the case. A chemical industry is going through a revolution. It's changing its feedstock from petro to bio. There's a lot of opportunities. And in order for you to get that opportunity, you'll have to, Partha was the example of many technologies in the energy sector, but they are built on technology and driven by good science. So my recommendation is at least don't feel the pressure to do internship day one, at least learn a little bit of whatever you'll be supposed to learn. And, you can drop it. It doesn't hurt after third year. I can't imagine that you're going to pack in 3 internships in 4 years. It's just too much. And spreading yourself thin really doesn't help. There's a lot of time you'll find, turn 45, you realize there's really nothing much going on. Life goes on 45 to 80. those years are totally useless, So putting another year learning more, I would put more value in that than just going and looking and scratching the surface. I don't recommend doing that. I think learn what you're supposed to, at least for a year. Try to go into the lab and do some experiment. I wish I was doing all that like some of these guys, but nonetheless, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there and things are changing. Read up about Industry 4.0. It's going to be a very different world in 10, 15 years.
No,
I'll just add a couple of points on my end. So one, I do see a lot of resumes coming out of undergrad as they're interviewing for analyst classes, and I see tons of internships to the point that Jaideep was saying, and resumes these days tend to be a lot more competitive than what I have seen, what we had back when almost 25 years ago. The other side of the equation that I want to throw at you is that to Pankaj's point, don't think of like at 21, most people don't know what they're really doing. Like I think you kind of, and everyone thinks that they are supposed to know, but they don't really know. I think you kind of have to give yourself till 30. And it's not even my point. We had David Rubenstein, the head of Carlyle Private Equity, gave us a talk the other day. And one of the things that he brought up was that he recommends everyone that they at least explore till they're 35. Now, he himself did nothing in financial services till he was 37. And now he's heading Carlyle Private Equity at 67 and worth almost $2 billion. So it's kind of like, you have to explore the world. Most people don't know what they're doing at 21. Give yourself a little bit more runway. If you are one of the lucky ones who knows what they're doing at 21, that's great. But explore, not just think about exploring till you're in your 4 years of college, but give yourself another 4 or 5 years at least after that.
And I'll add a couple more points to
I'd
that.
like to add something very.
Have a little bit of patience, life is not running away. Give yourself time till 30, 35. Take your time, take your vacations also, enjoy your vacations, go on treks or do whatever you want. I'll add a little bit to what Pankaj said. Do focus on your core, right? You are here to do a certain degree program, right? So do justice to it. And I'll share with you a different reason why, because I was on the interview panel for one of the IIMs some time back. So even when we would consider a candidate for an MBA program, right? I mean, you get a diversity of backgrounds. There are art students, there are engineering students, there are law students, there's everyone out there. What we would look for is how committed has this student been to whatever degree program that he or she was studying, right? Did you really focus on it? Are you a good chemical engineer? Now, you may never do a job in a chemical industry. That's okay. You can work in a bank, you can do acting, you can do whatever you want. But while you were a chemical engineer, were you a good chemical engineer? That's super critical, because that shows a sincerity, that shows a commitment, that shows a focus, and that will help you no matter what you do later. Yeah. So do think about it.
Yeah, I'd like to add, IIT offers a lot of other opportunities for building your character. More than education, I think the things that I learned by doing hostel activities, getting involved in hostel politics, sports activities, PAF, those actually builds you as a person, which are actually probably more applicable down the road. Your education will come. Yes, that is important. But the opportunities that IIT campus offers in building your personality, I think just get immersed into that. I think that will go a long way in helping you along your career. I'm in touch with my all my batch. Almost all of them have done very well, regardless of their path in whatever, because you are in touch with them, and because you will. They will subconsciously influence you along the way, so you will do well no matter what. Just the other panelists are saying, build character, build the positive attributes of a human being. You have one life to live, and you're gonna go away. you know, you're gonna leave no mark except maybe some good memories for this, you know, other fellow human beings. I mean, that's what you have to think.
Yeah. If I add to that, well, yes, I mean, this is a very special time of your lives, and the kinds of friendships, the kinds of shared experiences you build now are going to stay with you for much longer, because going forward, some of you will be super successful, some of you will have explored all the different corners of the world, and yet there will be something that a sense of a shared experience that will come together once all of you reconnect. And that is something that you will not be able to build, and you will not be able to share with all of your colleagues that you will meet over the years, and the other association that you build over the years will be very different from the associations you build now in these 4 years in IIT. And that's something that we have also all experienced. And I mean, right now, one of my partners in my business is my chemical engineering batchmate. With a second chemical engineering batchmate, we are partnering to bid on the project together. I mean, these are partnerships, these are friendships that we have built over 30 years. And of course, we are not the same personalities. We may often have disagreements, but the great thing is we know how to manage these disagreements, because as Handik mentioned, we understand the character of each person, and we rely on and we trust each other's characters. So that's one thing that you have to build going forward. The second point, which is a bit more professional, I would say, that even if you are studying as a chemical engineer, I think what we are seeing now is that every discipline usually relies on connecting the dots between multiple areas of expertise. So as a chemical engineer, for instance, you will find yourself getting into aspects of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. You will be expected to understand a bit about policy. You will be expected to understand a bit about business dynamics. You will be able to build, you will be expected to build a spreadsheet. So you will have to connect all of these dots in order to create a coherent opportunity, whether it's a research opportunity or a business opportunity, because ultimately you are selling an idea, you're selling a concept, you're selling a business, you're selling a research program, and you're selling it to human beings around you. So that entirety of skill set, that well-roundedness has to come across in the time that you spend, and it has to come across when you are facing an interviewer, or when you are facing a prospective business partner, or when you are facing an investor. So regardless of what discipline you go in, people have to first understand your character. They have to understand the way you relate to yourself, and you're comfortable in your own skin. And they have to weigh the approach that you have in building relationships with others, in influencing others, in gaining trust with others. And that is what you need to educate yourself in, apart from your chemical engineering degree. So all of this will be seen as you go out in the world.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well. I think many of the panelists did say that you know, about the thinking about the career, that it's really I mean, a career spans about 30-35 years, especially when, you know, you're looking at starting out at 21 or 22 after a BTech. So don't have to stress out so much. You know, take comfort that you're graduating from one of the top schools in the country, and, you know, maybe even in the world. So whatever choice you make, there will be, you know, it's not like an absolute right or wrong choice. You will have the opportunity to learn from it. And then once you learn, you know, whether that's what, you know, what you decided to do after BTech, you enjoy that and want to continue in that, certainly that you can do that. But even if you want to change, there will be opportunities to do that. So you don't have to stress out that much about it. And also the second thing, I think Pankaj was alluding to that, is, you know, during your BTech, and I'm also guilty of that, I wish I'd paid more attention to, you know, really learning some of the things that, we were being taught. And chemical engineering is
you were a silver medalist, man.
But still, there were. I did feel that.
Yes.
So,
sorry, go on.
I mean, No, I mean, the thing is that, there are chemical engineering, in our time itself. And now, there are so many diverse disciplines that chemical engineering touches. But as people look at their coursework, you don't have to just think of, okay, do I like chemical engineering or not? There is process control, which is completely different from, the traditional sort of transport and thermodynamics and heat transfer and mass transfer. So if you find that one hook, and I think it comes back to a little bit of self-awareness. If you say, look, this is one area I really like, so go and explore that area. Don't worry about, what if later on I don't like it, or, what are the options out there, in terms of, jobs. Don't have to worry about that. If you feel you like, or that about yourself, that these are one or two subjects I like, really go deep into that. And there's probably a separate discussion on what all IIT offers in terms of individuals wanting to explore one or two areas deeply. And I'm not that conversant with that in terms of internships or working with professors in their labs and things like that. But those are things that one can explore as a student, just being aware of these are the interests that I have from a technical standpoint, and take advantage of that.
I'll add a few words of caution that, be careful of kind of a thing. One is, don't get too bogged down with futuristic questions that, is this area hot or not? Will there be opportunities in future? Yeah. Will I get a job? Will it pay well? There's 35 years to think of, right? And nobody knows answers to any of these questions. So forget about it, right? You are just 20, 21. So you don't have to have answers to all the questions for the next 30 years of your life. That is one. Second, don't get bogged down with questions of grades. That is one mistake I made. So, in IIT, unfortunately, everyone was graded by the grades they had. Now, mind you, to give benefit of doubt to the faculty, they never said that grades are the only things that matter. It was the student peer pressure which said that, all students are equal, but some students are more equal than others. So suddenly you start equating your interest in the subject by the grades that you get. And that can be a big mistake. Third is, don't also allow the instructor, and Guru is here. So, Guru, with full respect to all the teachers, and by the way, I also teach at B schools, so I'm also a teacher at times. If for some reason a student is not able to connect to a subject because of a disconnect with the instructor, right? It's not the instructor's fault, it's not the student's fault, but that disconnect happens. Suddenly you start getting a dislike for the subject, right? Now that is unfair to you, that is unfair to the instructor, that is unfair to the subject. So don't allow the instructor to get in the way. There are great instructors who instill a passion and a liking for a subject. There may be others who, like I said, you are not able to connect to them. But overcome all of that and understand the subject, and then take a call whether this is a subject which is true to your liking or not. And I did not do that. So that's why I'm saying, don't repeat those mistakes. So if a prof was, in my words, not good, then in my world, the subject was not good. Yeah. And this correlation is unhealthy. So just be careful of grades, be careful of instructors, and be careful of getting unduly worried about future opportunities, because then you will limit yourself if you do that.
Right.
Yeah, I'll give an example. I don't know if you guys maybe know Kolu. Kolu is my classmate. He was one of the most lukha guy in my class, very friendly with everybody. He would never care for grades. He would come with his toothbrush in his pocket and come to class in pajama. He didn't do well in grades, but right now I have respect for him. He's the topmost, he's the CEO of a $1 billion company called Grail that got acquired by Illumina. And it's not because, he was, not good in it. He had tremendous networking skills. He was a genuine guy, and he would say, mera grade acha nahi hai to nahi hai. Matlab it's okay. So there is no correlation doing good in your grades and doing well in life. Remember, those are, there are different paths to getting to the end goal. And the race is very long. The competition is only with yourself, nobody else. We should remember that.
Right.
But I just
We
want to
were,
add,
yeah.
it doesn't hurt to get good grades, though. Don't make this assumption that you should try to get bad grades. Okay?
Yes.
I mean, all these things are great, but good grades also matter, and learning a subject well also matters, and learning science and having a passion also matters. While doesn't mean if you can't get it, you will be a failure. I think that was the point, but I don't think we're preaching, and I am sure these guys are not, that you should strive for bad grades.
Yes.
Pankaj, Guru just sent you the message, right?
Yeah, we are on WhatsApp.
Right. We were
Okay, go
having a question from Raj, but he is like, he had raised his hand and now it's down. Yeah. Raj, you might.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So, some of you, all of you pivoted your career, but some of you made much more harsher decisions in terms of dropping a master's degree or, dropping a job they were doing and well settled for like 5-10 years. Like, first of all, how do you know that true calling? And secondly, the true calling may be easy, but how do you take the decision? Like, do you worry about क्या होगा? My perspective is just from the next 5 years. I don't know कि 10 साल बाद क्या होगा. But in the next 5 years, I have a lot of things in mind. So whenever I get stuck, you might not know कि सब कैसे करते हैं. I just want to know how you thought about it. Like, how you took that decision, and like, did you evaluate all the options, or did you just take that decision and then think about it?
Let me take that question first. So here I've done both. I've dropped out of a degree. I've left a job to start my company at the age of 45. There, my decision framework was regret minimization. It was simple about what would I regret most if I stayed on in my job and reneged on my ambition of having my own company, doing the following things, or would I regret not having a salary and compromising a little bit on the short-term take-home pay? So that was, in a simplistic way, the kind of decision making that I made. Likewise, to drop out of my degree also, it was all about regret minimization. If I stay on in the degree, what will I get at the end of the degree, and how will I see myself? Versus if I go out, if I just go out on the limb, what will I get otherwise, and what's the worst that could happen? So if I take into account what's the worst that can happen, if I tell myself that, hey, that's not so bad after all, if I'm willing to live with it, and at the same time, if I feel good, not just about the positive outcome, but also about the process that I go through, also about the journey, and also about the decision that I make. If I feel good about that decision, then I know that it's the right decision to make, and that's how I've always done it.
Yeah. I think you need to figure out your bare necessities. In my case, when I had to decide between jumping into a startup with no experience in business and whatever, it was my assessment. I took about a week to figure that out. My assessment was I just needed 2 meals a day, 8 hours of sleep, and a cot to a hut over my head. I think once you figure out your bare necessities, it becomes more cumbersome as you have more families, more difficult. But once you do that, everything you have to think as a positive. And then once you make a decision, just like in Mahabharata, once Arjun, he took so much time to figure out, oh, main kya karu, I don't know. But once he decided I have to fight, he let the arrow go. It's not in his. He had to do his karma and his decision to what will happen next. So a lot of nuggets you can get from some of those, epic, stories. And at this age, you kind of realize, oh, everything can be, Indian civilization was so great at that time. They had written about all of these, dilemmas, dichotomies, and decision makings right then and there.
It's very understandable if you have certain apprehension ke kya hoga, that's I appreciate that. We still do, right? I mean, even today, if you ask me what will happen 3 years or 4 years down the line, I can say with some probability, but no certainty, right? So learn to live with this uncertainty. I think what happens is, and this is perhaps like a case of golden handcuffs or whatever you may call it, because we have strived hard in our school days to get to where we are here, right? And I'm looking at it from the point of view of a student, right? So we tend to become a little risk averse, that, we don't want to lose all that we have strived for and struggled for, etc., etc. So there is a certain fear of failure, that if I try that and if it doesn't succeed, then what will happen? What will happen to me? What will happen to my life? What will happen to my credibility, etc., etc. ऐसा नहीं है, right? I mean, if you fall, you'll get up and you'll walk again, and you'll fall and you'll get up and you'll walk again. That's how it is. So don't be afraid. You will not have answers to all the questions, but that should not stop you. So sometimes I feel that, our degree becomes a bit of a hindrance, because now we don't want to start at the bottom of the ladder again and again and again, because we think, I'll get a high paying job and I'm set for life, which is great. I mean, if that happens to you, then nothing like it. Congratulations. But if it doesn't and you need to struggle a bit, it's all right. Yeah, you will succeed one day. If not on day one, then someday you will. Right? So be positive.
And that's why you should also pay attention to your relationships. I mean, through good times, through bad times, your relationship should be very strong. Make sure that you focus on your family, make sure you focus on your friends, and build relationships that will stand the test of time, regardless of the circumstance. There should be some values that connect you with other people. Once you have those connections, they will stand by you all through good times and bad. And then it will help you get perspective on what is important in life and what isn't.
Right. We have a question from Sahil, I think. Sahil, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. One or two of the panelists sort of touched upon this point, but I just wanted to ask this again. So I'm a final year student, and there must be others from junior years as well. And all of us have sort of struggled ki aage kya karna hai, and probably most of us have worked towards ki I want to get to that one job or that one degree, etc. Now, given the nature of your journeys, it almost seems like seemingly dissimilar experiences have been just stitched together to form sort of a very coherent whole. So how do we take ourselves less seriously at this point? Because like being 2021, we are very warped and limited in our worldview. But at the same time, it's the feeling that, kuch to karna padega, varna kya hoga, etc., etc. Or this is the role that I actually want to go for. That is still there. Although notionally, I do realize that, okay, 30 years career is there. There's a lot of time to explore and fail and succeed, etc., etc. How do we actually internalize that fact to sort of be more grounded and just be more chilled out?
I was in a bit of a similar state, right, in my final year. So I postponed the decision by 2 years by going to an IIM. So for me, it was a question of change of hostel, change of city, change of friends, and I get a 2-year longer runway to make up my mind. And in the process, I also get a degree which kind of assures a job and social credibility, etc., etc. Yeah. So I'm not saying everyone should do that, but just sharing with you. So when in doubt, you don't want to take certain hard decisions. Find something which allows you a little longer time to make up your mind. That's all.
Yeah, I also echo. I mean, sorry, Sandeep, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if the main decision is between continuing with chemi or non-chemi, I feel that closing out the technical option is a very hard choice. Once you close out the technical option, it becomes harder to come back to it. So to come back to chemi again, you would have to consider a master's degree, after a couple of years of any non-chemi job, which is again possible, but it becomes harder. So if one is not sure, or you or your classmates are not sure, then to keep the option open, be in your chemie role, and then there is always either through an MBA or even within the company, it's easier to, or not even easier. I mean, you can transition from a technical role to a sales marketing role within the company. Those are very much that's very much possible, and many people have done it. So that's one way to think about it. If the decision is between sticking to chemie and non-chemie, and you're not sure of that.
A little bit like Pathare said, for me, it was a lot more about just like run passionately at whatever opportunity set is in front of you at that point of time. And then you will either know that that's for you, or it'll hit a dead end, and then some other fork will open up. So I think to your question, that it seems like all these are disparate stories that get connected to each other. I didn't know whether chemical engineering was absolutely the right calling for me or not, but I did go down that path for 5 years. It ended up hitting a dead end, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll switch over at that point of time. So that's one thing. Ironically, the other thing is that at least when we are conducting interviews as corporate America, it's on the other side, you kind of have an expectation that the person who's on the other side is kind of has to have their own story together and has to have a strong view.
Right.
So it's a little bit of like, we are all telling you, take great risks and don't have to have all the answers. But the expectation when you are having interviews is that you kind of have to have answers to everything. So you have to have a little bit of a delicate balance around that, because you cannot go into an interview and saying, well, I'm here and I don't know what you have to offer, but I'm exploring everything. That doesn't work. I think it's very critical that you do a lot of research on who you are sitting on the other side with, because it has to come out that you know what the other side has to offer and why you want them as an option, because you are competing with 100 or maybe even thousands of other people, and you're working towards one opportunity. So it's a little bit of a delicate balance in my mind as to how you have to handle those things.
Sandeep, that's a great point you brought out, and I also think that thinking about multiple options is not necessarily exclusive to what you said. I mean, suppose somebody's interviewing at a Deutsche Bank, and also interviewing, let's say, management consulting or a chemical job, but you can always have one hook. I mean, still be true to yourself, still be authentic, and say that, look, I'm interested in Deutsche Bank because of this one particular hook. Whatever, you could have 3 interests, right? That doesn't mean it's exclusively finance or it's finance to the exclusion of other interests. So you're still being authentic to yourself and to the interviewer. But it's important to do the research. So that's a very crucial point Sandeep said, that in interviews, you cannot be, look, I'm exploring these things and 3 things and I'm interested. No, you have to be very clear on why, this particular, suppose it's Deutsche Bank and finance, why that is of interest to you. But you're still being authentic, and you're not misleading anybody. So that's a critical difference sort of to understand. That you are authentic, but at the same time keep options open.
No, that's very critical. So with about 25 years of experience, you get a sense of who's being authentic and who isn't. And there are some people whose stories are very joined up and it's very naturally progressing. When you speak with them, you get a sense of whether that is really the case, or whether it's just something that they have joined up together just to create a story in their CV. In some cases, you see people who have gone one direction, who have hit a dead end, who have started all over again. And there, the way they communicate their story also tells you whether it's authentic or whether these guys are just going around cluelessly and randomly in life. So that's key, that even if things aren't joined up, even if you have gone through certain experiences and have had to backtrack and then try something else, that's part of your life story, man. And that's something that is really compelling, because it also shows how you have picked yourself up, how you have hit that dead end, how you have regrouped yourself, and how you have conducted yourself in those situations. So that's also part of your character, like what Handik was saying earlier. So just be authentic. Be proud of the life you are leading, as long as you are leading it in a way that is respectful to yourself and that is respectful to others. And you will see eventually that people will recognize it and will reward you for it.
So I'll just share a personal experience. As I said, I joined McKinsey thinking, this is such a great option, and I'm getting to work there. But I really did not like the work, and because of that, and because of other things, there was a 2001 crash at that time as well. So I had to leave, and I was without a job for about 4 or 5 months, and was looking for work at that time. And that time it was a challenge. I used to find this challenge to explain, why am I looking for a job and why I don't have a job for, the past 3 months on the resume. And after having done a few interviews, I remember talking to a friend of mine who had worked for a bit, who was senior to me. And they kind of gave this perspective that there's nothing wrong in, like, first of all, many people have gone through that experience. And as long as one is authentic about it and say that it wasn't sort of, there are a lot of people who are not fit with the management consulting industry. And as long as that's clear, and what is also clear is why one is interviewing for this new company that I would be interviewing at, there's absolutely no problem. I mean, people don't view that as a negative or, why are you switching careers or anything like that. So don't have to, of course, that's a little bit different than your situation where you are interviewing right out of school, but the one doesn't have to excessively worry about that. Just make sure that you have a coherent, an authentic story when you talk to whoever you're speaking to.
Add one more point here. I think there is this assumption that we are suited for every possible job. I mean, it's not necessarily true. I don't think one should be very presumptuous. And there's another challenge being from IIT. There's a huge burden because there are some people who have done exceptionally well, but it's always a distribution. I mean, first of all, everybody has done reasonably well. If you look at the statistics, everybody has done well. I mean, on this panel across the batches, but some of them are exceptionally well. I mean, if you are a roommate of Sundar Pichai, you will be miserable no matter what, right? Because the guy is just done amazingly well, right? So I would say, I think you have to assess whom you are. Not everybody is born to be a CEO. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I can write to you and I can bet my life on that. People have different skills, different temperament. And I think some level of acceptance of who you are and what drives you, right? I mean, we also know from our batches, some people just want to be a musician. There's one guy who became a famous director and all, right? So I think there are disparate interests. So what fits you, right? I mean, you cannot be same time in a finance company and a research manager and this and that. I mean, if you are in finance, then you have a different liking. So in my mind, I think some level of soul searching has to be there, right? We can't just go in that I don't know anything about myself and, I'm going to figure it out all my life. Yeah, that happens. And also that you can't do everything. I mean, I knew for a fact that there is no way I can run a marketing department. I would not sell anything to anybody for a fact of life. So, I would not be a marketing manager. And if I were to become one, let's say, I would just bring the company down. So I feel in my mind that some recognition has to be there. You can't not know yourself being 21, 22, and you'll know much more over the years, but few things should be clear enough that what's not good for you. Okay.
Thanks a lot for your inputs.
Thank you so much, Sahil. We're running a little out of time, so we'll just take one last question. It's from Amog. Amog, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello all of you. This was a wonderful session indeed, quite insightful. So on that note, having heard a lot of advice about taking conventional wisdom with a pinch of salt and figuring it out as you go along the way, I wanted to ask each and every one of you if there was one piece of advice that you could give to your graduating selves, what would that be?
I have one song. It's called the Sunscreen Song by Baz Luhrmann. Just listen to it a few times and you'll know. It hits me, resonates with me, and I just give that. Anyone heard that?
opportunity given to this.
No, I would say do not be afraid of failure. Do not be afraid of stumbling. Do not be afraid of crashing. Do not be afraid of, as Kalyan said, near-death experiences. They are near-death experiences, not death. Yeah. So there's a difference. Yeah. And then you'll be happy no matter what.
I would say, regardless of the circumstance, firstly, be comfortable in your own skin. And then secondly, just focus on the basics. Your character is determined by three things. In bad circumstances, how do you treat yourself? In really good circumstances, how do you treat others? And in middling circumstances, how do you just get down and just keep focused on the work when nothing remarkable is happening, whether good or bad? How do you just keep discipline? How do you work? And how do you make sure that you stick to the grind while keeping an eye out for the opportunity? That's it. Just do these basics, and regardless of what you're doing, regardless of which field you're in, you will do well, and you'll be happy.
Yeah, I would say self-awareness for me, and self-awareness is pretty kind of loose word. I would more specifically look at sort of technical or rather areas of interest in the what I was studying, and also as a person. And as a person, it's a lot more difficult because there are various facets to, how does one define a personality? So there are common terms like introverted, extroverted, are you an individual and a team player? Do you like working on something basic as we are thinking of careers? Do you like working on products or, services, things like that? So spend a little time, and there are books now, of course, a lot of books and, very easily accessible books. Maybe reading a few of those to really understand one's personality can go a long way, and developing that self-awareness will help make some of these, and not just career decisions, even other decisions, maybe easier, or fulfilling. That's what I would say.
What I would say is like, look, I took enough risks in my mind, but I think I should have probably taken even more risks in my 20s, because when you get into your 30s and 40s, taking risks, I know Pathare is taking one, but it gets a little bit more challenging. So explore your 20s, because I think I wish I had taken more risks. And then on a little bit of a smaller note, IIT has a lot more to offer. I think I would think I just ended up scratching the surface of what IIT had to offer over the 4 years. Probably could have done a lot more of my time out there, but I think that those would be the two things that as you look back in my mind.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Your age right now is the best time to take risks because the baggages are low, and I like seeing this for those who wants to jump into startup. If you want to fly, you have to jump. You cannot be worried that niche kahan girunga. You have to fly. You have to jump. Eventually, you have to take the plunge.
I think the only thing I would say is, since we end up working a lot, at some point you would want to be doing something where you're passionate about. Because, no matter how you take it, you'll have to slog it out. 8 hours, 10 hours a day is a normal until you turn 55, 60. So at some point, you have to like it, because otherwise it's a big slog. I mean, all the things you think are important, money and all, they become fairly unimportant with time. Once you get it, you realize, okay, it's the charm of getting an amazing car, whatever, goes away once you have it, but you still have to work. So I feel that have a passion or build it. It's not going to come easy. I mean, I still struggle, I'll just give you example, being in Pfizer. If you think you're not working on a vaccine program, you feel you are a miserable slop, I mean, imagine with all things I've done, and I kept thinking, God, I got to work on this program. If I miss it, I've lost it. This is something which comes in once in 100 years. So, it doesn't matter, right? You'll always feel that you have lost something, but I think having a passion really helps.
Thanks a lot, all of you, for those words of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Amog. Okay, so since we're already a little out of time, I'll conclude the session. But I had a personal doubt, and I'll take the benefit of asking that. How important is the role of a peer group, like in deciding your career, in deciding whatever things you do? How important is a peer group? And for that, I would also like if Guru sir and other batchmates of yours could pipe in to answer that. It'll be nice. You can all unmute yourselves now. The settings have been changed.
I mean, are you saying, go with the group, or I mean,
No, like
what
the
of the peer
motivation
group
that
is?
they provide, the motivation or
Oh,
the,
yeah.
how is it important? The group that you have, does it channelize your energies in some particular way?
Yes.
We'll give the floor to
I
Guru.
think,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
Guru
I think
should
it should be, you shouldn't be stuck in a group with negative people. I think that's the most important.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Kalyan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think not so sure that that your group really helps you decide what you want to do, right? Because you're good friends with a lot of people, but you don't necessarily all have the same personalities, right? That would be just strange. So I think I think having a supportive group, and I think that's the point that a lot of my classmates were making, is that after 25 years I can write them an email and they'll all agree to spend 2 hours of their time here, right? And I can sort of rely on them to do that. So I think having that kind of a support structure is very nice, but it's not what determines how you decide what you want to do. So, right.
Yeah.
I would say though that you get a couple of things, right? You get one, you can bounce ideas of people, so that's very important in life to be able to bounce things of people. Two, I think when you have seniors who have graduated, they can give you at least a little bit of experience on where things ended up being 1 or 2 years out from there. So I think those are important things that you have to make your decisions based on. So I think collecting as much input as possible from all different avenues, and then you have to make your own decision. But you have to use your support groups to collect information. It could be your parents too. I mean, they have lived a life too, and you can get a lot of information out of them. I mean, a lot of you guys probably, like, I mean, our kids probably are getting to an age where you are right now, so it's not that far off. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah. I just want my peer group to wake me up when I'm sleeping. That's about it. But yeah, that's it. But apart from that, I mean, this peer group that you have is a group that knows who you are at a very formative level. These are not the people who will see the exterior version of you, the facade that you put forth when you are in a professional environment. These are people who know you really at your core. And so always keep them close because they keep it real for you.
Thank you so much, everyone. It really was an insightful session, and I hope the audience also enjoyed it. And I think, and if you like batchmates want to interact, I can leave this meeting open and leave. No issues in that.
So thank you for having us. This was great.